Welcome, everybody, to Womansplaining. This is a conversation between a number of women writers, journalists, activists, filmmakers, based on the recent book by Senator Sharmeen Rahman, in which he had brought together a number of writers, women writers particularly, who had written about different aspects. And now that book has been followed by a series of conversations based around the same themes with the same authors. So I've been lucky enough to be roped in for one of these conversations with two of, I would say, the most admired women in that list of writers. One, of course, is Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. She needs no introduction whatsoever. Our Oscar winner, filmmaker, talented woman, much admired. And of course, the second is someone who's particularly important to me as someone who has worked at the Herald, Fifi Haroon. She's known for many roles that she has played in her life in various fields. But of course, for me, particularly what is close is the fact that she's also a fellow journalist, someone that we've always looked up to and followed her writings before we entered the field and even later. So welcome to this conversation, Ms. Chinoy and Ms. Haroon. They have both written for the book and on issues which are obviously related to the work that they do, but perhaps not, it's not about Ms. Chinoy, who may have just written about the films that she has worked on or the work that she has done, but about other things. And similarly, Ms. Haroon has also written extensively before and reported, commented on our what we call is the entertainment sector, our drama industry, and she's written on that. And these are the two topics that they've covered. Ms. Chinoy, I'd like to begin the conversation with you. Your piece was particularly interesting. I wish Senator Sharmeen Rahman was here for this conversation, as she was supposed to be earlier, but she fell ill at the last moment. That it was, she spoke about women activism in a very different sphere, the parliament. You spoke about women activism, women who are making a difference, but at the grassroots level, perhaps at levels where we normally do not hear about, because especially sitting in the cities, in sort of the positions that we do, especially as a journalist, for us, automatically, a lot of the time we tend to think of activism as something that that comes from top down, which it's not necessarily supposed to be. So it was particularly interesting for that reason, your article, because you completely sort of ignore, I'm using that word deliberately, I don't know whether it was deliberate or not, you ignore that aspect, that activism or change has to come from the top, the state has to do it, those of us who are in more powerful positions need to make sure that there is change. You're talking about the very ordinary women who actually take the greater risk, who actually face the greater challenge and yet are able to make a difference. Do you think that this is very important, and we sometimes perhaps tend to forget about this aspect, that this change, when it comes, and if it's to be sustainable, it will have to be, come from bottoms up. It has to be grassroots rather than this top-down affair that we keep focusing on all the time.
I think that change has to happen on many levels. So I think that there is a role for parliamentarians and senators to define the laws that exist in this country, to define the way forward. But the heavy lifting has to be done by the people on the ground. Women who know their community, who know the norms and the conforms of the community, and women who are working with the current structure, whether they're running a school, or whether they have a women's jirga, or whether they're freeing women and children from bonded labor, or whether they're working on domestic violence. They are working and creating spheres of influence with other women and almost laying the foundation of a quiet and silent revolution that we hope will take place in this country when all of these spheres come together. I talk about rural Pakistan because that's seldom spoken about when we talk about Pakistan. We always talk about urban Pakistan. And I think that there's something happening in rural Pakistan that we must pay attention to. That there are women in small towns and in villages who might have come from the city or might have had exposure to the city who are investing in an infrastructure that we hope will help young girls realize that there is a world free of violence where their dreams can come true, where they can go to school, where they can get an education and get a job. Unfortunately, there are far too few of these women. And the reason is that the infrastructure, the support system doesn't exist to amplify their voices greater than their communities. And nor are we learning from these women. So if somebody is doing something wonderful in a small town in Punjab, we are not learning from that to replicate that in other villages or in other towns. And that's what I hope that films can do by documenting some of these women and creating their films. We're putting them on a mobile cinema and sort of zipping it across Pakistan and screening it for other girls. Because there's nothing more powerful that I found is to watch a young girl look at a woman on screen and see her in her glory doing things that she will never see on Pakistani television.
Thank you. Ms. Haroon, your article in that sense is very different. And it's about this fact that where we think that, again, whether it's the drama industry or popular culture, films, dramas, they can again make that difference. They can spread that awareness. Perhaps again, it's a little bit of that top down thing. Uh, to what extent is that realistic? I sometimes wonder, because obviously, especially in the subcontinent, till recently, we had that very clear distinction between what we thought was popular culture, which was entertainment, and then the phrase that we picked up from India, which is the parallel cinema, that one was not supposed to have any objective perhaps beyond just entertaining people, and our industry perhaps straddled the two. But now, of course, I think your critique comes from the fact that it is now ensconced very firmly in that sphere where we say, oh, it is just perhaps for entertainment. It doesn't have a higher purpose. It is not spreading any message, something that PTV did. Do you think it's very important for the popular entertainment industry to do this, to keep in mind the fact that it has to serve a higher purpose, and this is what you're trying to highlight?
Well, I think that there is no such thing as just entertainment. When you're putting a message, when you're putting something on a screen, it invariably has some form of message. And right now, it may not be a conscious message as in do this and do that, but in Pakistani drama, everything is a conscious message. It is what we have is prescriptive drama in this country. We are told, we are given ideas about what womanhood is. We are told what ideal femininity is, what being a woman is all about. And what being a woman is all about is not aspirational in terms of, can we get a job? Can we have our voice heard? Can we make money to feed our family? Being a woman on the Pakistani television screen is all about, can I cook something for my mother-in-law tonight? And will my husband be pleased with what he has to hear when he comes home? Now, everything that is done, so that in itself is a message. But the problem now is that the message has become misogynistic, the message has become confined. I would go so far as to say that, when you see multiple, if you sit back and just, look at all the dramas that are coming on a Friday evening on our television screens, and there are multiple channels that do this and which have only channels which focus just on drama, you will almost feel that it's a continuing story. You will feel that 20 dramas are forming one story and the same story. And that story is that women in this country are are downtrodden, which they are, not saying that women are not going through difficulties in this country, but you choose how to depict that. Are you telling stories in which women are able to triumph over their odds? No, you're not. You're telling stories in which women out of 40 episodes are suffering in 39, and in the 40th episode, there's one sort of monologue, and you're supposed to understand that everything's fallen into place. We think that the most popular format that is used on television today in Pakistan, that is shown on Pakistani television, are actually talk shows. It's not. It's not. And this has been verified time and time again in surveys that the most popular format that is watched on Pakistani television, both terrestrial and on satellite, is Pakistani drama, and it's watched ironically also by men. So it's not just prescriptive for women. What it tends to do is that it tends to show men how to behave as well. And the way that they show men how to behave is, and here again is another message, the amount of dramas in which men are marrying twice, they're keeping the same wife in one home. They are extremely nasty to the first, and then eventually they discover the first was the better one. But of course, again, 39 episodes, they're terrible to her. So, what is happening again and again is this echo effect that you're seeing on Pakistani television, where every drama, almost every serial is unanimously the same, and where women are shown crying constantly. In fact, they say that if a woman is not, a producer, a very famous producer has been known to have said that a drama head, in fact, that if a woman is not slapped many times in a serial, nobody is going to watch it. So we have this constant tale of sadness, of despair, of the worst. And again, I'm not saying that this is not happening in Pakistan. What I'm saying is that when you just show that, and you show nothing beyond it, you show no level beyond that, then we're in trouble. So there is a message, and the message that's going out is completely the opposite of what the message should be going out.
Ms. Chinoy, again, this brings me back to the same issue that, what Ms. Haroon has just spoken about, that there is a certain message that's being spread again and again in our, popular entertainment industry. When you look at our newspaper or our talk shows, they also seem to be, perhaps talking about the same issues. But the sort of women that you speak about or that you write about in your piece are not coming through, not even in our newspapers, not even on our news channels. There has to be a reason for this. But, for example, if there is a murder case of Noor Muqaddam in Islamabad, news channels will talk about it 5 days in a row. There will be outrage on social media, on the talk shows. There will be much heartburning. But why don't we talk so much about the success stories in the rural areas? Are we just not interested in powerful women or women who are making a change in small communities? What do you think? Where do you think is the problem?
Well, first of all, I actually blame women. So all of these dramas that we're talking about that depict all these women have female actresses. The television channels have senior women in power and positions. Many of these channels are owned and run by women. And many of these writers are women. So if women collectively do not want to show themselves as strong, want to read these scripts and act in these dramas, okay, then we are failing our own gender. So I actually partially blame women for the content that is on television, because if actresses refuse to act these out, if you have producers who are women who say we will not produce this, and television owners who are women who say absolutely not on my television channel, then that's a different kind of conversation to be having. I refuse to take us as victims and to say that all of this narrative that is being generated about women, the narrative that is being generated about women have a role to play in that narrative that is being generated about them. And there is a reason why strong women are not on television. It's because there is a massive pushback against having those kind of roles, because apparently it's not entertaining when a woman is a hero and she is smarter than a man and she is able to solve a case, or if she's a detective, or she's sort of going out there and doing incredible things, because we like to see women as helpless, as asking men for help all the time, and in no way should she outshine a man. So why wouldn't someone like me be creating content for Pakistani television channels? It's as simple as this. The content that I want to create will never be funded, will never be aired, and will have enormous amounts of resistance. And it does. When I have documentary films about strong women and I want to put it on television, I'm always told nobody's going to watch this. So I think the blame is not simply on men alone, it's also on women.
Ms. Haroon, do you think social media here can make a difference? In recent times, we have talked about there are now short films on YouTube. People have made the effort to produce them. Then obviously there's the streaming version. Pakistan has produced a couple of series with very different content, which unfortunately has gone on streaming services, which are not national as such. But you also spoke about the fact then we've obviously got TikTok, which has made a difference. We had Kandil Baloch. Do you think the sort of the fact that there are now multiple mediums, television of course remains the biggest, there is no doubt about it, but sort of the multiplication of the mediums in themselves, and some of which are perhaps easier to access than television in some ways, do you think that can make a difference in terms of the problem that we have with content?
So if you go on YouTube, for example, and you see the amount of Pakistani serials that are being shown on YouTube, where every episode has about 11 million views, you will begin to understand what's going on. So there are alternative mediums as well, but it's a matter of what is reaching the most number of people. So the women that Sharmeen is talking about, the activists that Sharmeen is talking about, probably in their neighborhoods and in their homes, they are not really watching those alternative web series. They are probably watching the mainstream television series, like right now, Khuda aur Mohabbat 3, as it's called, on one of the channels, is getting approximately 12 million views just per episode, on YouTube, and that's leaving aside the traditional legacy media that we're talking about. So I'm saying there is alternative content, but it's in its infancy. It's not developed. Some of it is quite remote from what a lot of these women would understand. A lot of sort of the ordinary women would understand, or perhaps even have access to. So if you're paying on your phone to download material, you're going to go for something that is, or at least what is being seen is that what they're watching is what is on television. That's what they're watching repeatedly again and again and again. Um, some Sharmeen is right in saying that a lot of women are also, there are women who are heading Pakistani channels. There are women who are writers. There are women who are acting. Um, what I would just like to explain a little bit about why that happened I'm not sure about why it happened, but how it happened. Um, there was a real dearth of writers in this country for drama serials, and pretty much there was a one channel or two, STN, PTV, and Hasina Moin pretty much ruled, television in the early days. There was one television drama, let's say per evening, or even less than that. And the Tanhaiya would be on once a week, and people would wait to see it, and the streets would be empty. The explosion of the Pakistani media meant that overnight, and this is a problem for news, it's a problem for television drama, for any kind of format or genre that you're using, is overnight we went from 1 and 2 channels to 30 channels, now 80 channels. So there is a dearth of trained professionals who actually know what their job is or what's going on. So what happened was that in one particular television channel, this is where it started, is that you had a lot of course, you had a lot of Indian content coming in, and we were trying to compete with the Indian content. But there were no writers to go to because writers were not earning money, writers had not been trained. You had the Nurul Huda Shah in between, who was writing a magnificent sort of, rural themes, but was bringing up rural themes, bringing up women's issues and all kinds of sort of issues around freedom of speech, but they weren't enough. And so what one channel in particular did was they turned to digest writers. And digest writers were trained in a particular format of writing in a particular field. It's like suddenly, if the BBC decided that they had no other writers and they would only go to Mills and Boons and Harlequin to write all their drama serials, that's what you would have. What would you have at the end of it? So when I've been interviewing some of these actors that Sharmeen has also spoken of, they when they do get these kind of roles, several of them, and it's a difficult thing because this is their bread and butter, this is what they live on, and they also have to pay their bills. But several of them demand changes. They ask for their roles to be changed, but they can do it only within a certain kind of context. So what was happening is, suddenly you had all these women who were digest writers who had never seen the inside of an office, who had never thought about perhaps deep philosophical questions that might be affecting women in the day, but who were bringing forward very black and white characters with no nuance. There were bad women and there were good women. There were bad men and there were good men. Bad women were the ones who wore Western clothes, invariably. Bad women were the ones who went to work, and good women were the ones who basically tried to. So there was a drama serial just last year, I think, called Sabahat, in which a lot of women liked it very much because the title character by Mawra Hussain was somebody who decided to go to work and open a small bakery in her home, for instance. And I thought, wonderful, they're showing a woman who has a problem, she has an income issue, and she's opening a bakery. She's making big cakes in her home and sending them out to larger bakeries. And the day that she pays off the loan that she has done this work for, she says, today I'm going to stop work. And all these women around her turn around and say, but why are you doing this? You've got a viable career, you've got a viable business, you're doing so well. And she says, no, I wasn't doing it for this. I was just doing it to pay off my loan. And now I don't need to do this anymore. And in that one sentence, that whole serial for me just dwindled. Because what you're saying is this girl has spent the last 1 year or however long, making this business work, and it's so admirable. And then suddenly she says, oh, but I don't want to do this anymore. My purpose is over. I will now go back to being, the person at home that I was. So these kind of outcomes, I mean, there was a serial that, right at the beginning, and this was in 2016, and Sharmeen and several other women were used in the promotion of that serial before it came on. And I'm sure Sharmeen must have been told what the beginning of the serial was like, in which a character played by Sabah Kamar, her best friend is murdered by her brother-in-law, and she goes against her whole family. This is called Cheekh Sharmeen. And she goes against her whole in-laws, who are very, very prominent, a very prominent family. And she takes them to court and she sues them and everything. But what happens along the way is she has a miscarriage, her child dies, her husband dies, her mother dies. She is declared insane and put into jail. For not into jail, sorry, into an asylum for a certain amount of time. And by the end of it, she loses every single thing that she could speak about. Now, I'm sure when they went to Sharmeen and said, this here is a serial called Cheekh, and it's about women speaking up. I mean, who wouldn't support that? We would all support that. But what happened is, when you're telling a woman that, sure, speak up and you lose everything. I mean, the very sort of unlikely scenario that your child will die, your husband will die, your mother will die, and you'll be put into a lunatic asylum. What message, talking about messages, what message is that sending out? You're telling women, speak up, but if you speak up, you lose everything. So, we all try in our own ways to help out and to promote serials that are better, but there are no guarantees that it's going to turn out well. And unfortunately, things turn out badly on Pakistani television a lot of the time.
Ms. Chinoy, that this sort of while I was listening to Ms. Haroon, I think the first question that came to my mind was that, you know, all the women that you spoke about in that chapter, there's you know, the one running the school in Swats, the one who's running the Jirga for women. What inspired them? I mean, we keep talking about the message, again, that top down message, the role models, but and were any of these women looking to anything outside when they decided to do what they did, or it was just something that came from within? You know, it's a question worth asking, that how much difference does the world, you know, the larger world around them make? What inspires them? What motivates them to make that kind of a change in their own lives, in their villages, their communities?
In each of the women that I find as my personal heroes as well, is that when you ask them, like, what is it that pushes you to do what you do? What is it that motivates you? What do you look up to? The answer inevitably is the fact that what's happened to us, we don't want that to happen to any other girl in our community. So Gule Khandana runs a school for young girls in Swat, and she does it because when she was growing up and she wanted an education, people would ridicule her. What is this girl going to get an education and do? And then she happened to get married to a man who not only empowered her by saying, you should get more educated than I am, but run this school. Even when the Taliban had taken over Swat, she was running that school. So it's this feeling that I wanted to do something and someone empowered me too, and I want to make sure that other young girls also have that opportunity to do so. And you know, Sayyida Fatma, who rescues women and children from brick kilns, she and her brother would go with their father when their father used to work in brick kilns, educating workers about their rights. She used to go as a child with him and watch that and see all these children who were barefoot and uneducated. And she made it her life's mission after her father passed to continue his work by saving these families from bonded labor. So each one of the women, it's been a personal experience that has moved them and has forced them to assess their lives and what kind of lives they want to have. And you know, there's no glory in what they're doing. It's far from the newspapers' headlines. It's far, nobody really knows who they are, and they are literally risking their lives every day. Because, like in the case of Sayyida Fatma, she's been shot at. Her brother had his kneecaps busted with 2 bullets that went through when they were going to rescue a family. With Gule Khandana, she had the Taliban threaten her. With Tabassum Adnan, who runs a women's jirga, she routinely gets bullets sent to her in the mail with a name on it. Shaista Bukhari was working in a village to convince the men not to be involved in domestic violence, and there was a lot of pushback. So it's not like these women have an easy path. These women do what they do. They invest in the communities every day, and they really are the unsung heroes of this country. And I think that there are so many more that I hope to uncover as we do our work. But literally in every village or town that you go to and you start a conversation, there will be someone who will talk about a woman who has helped them, a woman who is doing something for other women. And you could go to the most downtrodden of villages or towns, but you will find these women. The unfortunate thing is that we're all working in silos, that we're not working together, that if there is a way for all of us to, instead of in silos, that we have a patchwork of a network that essentially learns from each other, helps each other, figures each other, to move to the next phase. That would be wonderful. The thing that I find that is lacking in women, and it stems from what Fifi has been talking about, is confidence. Women lack confidence and the ability to believe that they can be someone, because your media tells you cannot, your society tells you that you cannot. The women who are actually real heroes are never projected on your screen. They're never on billboards. You never see them anywhere. You really have to search if you want to find these kind of women. And the narrative of victim versus survivor has to change. We are victims of violence, yes, but we're also survivors of violence. We're also fighters. We're also on the front lines. And I think that image of a Pakistani woman needs to be blasted everywhere. What is a Pakistani woman? Is she what you see on a local drama, or is she the three of us on this conversation? Who is a Pakistani woman? And I think that that's something that we all need to ask ourselves.
I'm going to come back to you with this question on the next phase that you spoke about. But before that, of course, Ms. Haroon, you spoke about Udari in your piece.
Mhm.
As an example of a drama that we should be encouraging more of, and of course it's been talked about extensively since it came on air. But personally, I have a little bit of a concern here that if we depend too much, we have our channels which they go for the rating and all of that, and then suddenly in between comes a drama like Udari, and I think there was a one recently also on human trafficking, but they're funded by NGOs. It's a good thing, obviously, in the middle of this sort of problematic roles and themes and tropes, you have, something different. But if we become dependent, or we get used to this idea that only, when there is an NGO funding, will we break the stereotype? Is this also something that we need to be concerned about, that we let our channel owners, the content creators, get used to this idea that you keep playing the ratings game, you keep doing the problematic themes and tropes, and you wait for the foreign funding to come in before you will do something which is better and
Okay.
which sends the better message.
Okay. So if Udari had not got foreign funding, it would not have been made. That's the first thing. Okay. So the way I see it, in this kind of environment, you take what you can get. And if you can get a foreign NGO, or you can get a local NGO or whoever to fund a worthwhile project, do it. Okay. So you can't say no to that kind of thing. Uh, our TV channels are lazy. They hook onto a formula. So when Udari came on, they were so sure, everybody was so sure that Udari would never do well. Pemra tried desperately to shut it down. It was given a notice. So it went through a lot of sort of opposition. But the wonderful thing about Udari was that Udari was not just about funding. The NGO actually was in control of the quality of the serial, so they checked everything. It was a absolutely commercial serial. It had music, it had top stars, it used the commercial formula in that way. And yet everything about Udari was right, or almost everything about Udari was right, in that the women behaved in a particular manner, heroes were encouraged. Also, Udari also encouraged respect for female performers and female musicians and singers. I mean, it was that was also one of the side themes that came out. So after Udari, and Udari was on a Sunday, and Udari had such high ratings that everybody was gobsmacked, because all the channels had been saying that if you do this, nobody will watch it. If you do this, people will not be able to watch something like this with their family. Something about child abuse. How will, because in Pakistan there's not that many television screens, so families tend to watch dramas sitting in a group, or they may even see it with their neighbors, or the village. So what you're doing is you're reinforcing, by that mode of watching, you're reinforcing certain mores, certain ideas, certain ways of thinking about what a woman is, or what her role is in society. And yet here was Odari bringing about change, because people were finally daring, even within families and within neighborhoods, to speak about something like this, to speak up about child abuse. The conversation had started. So all that was great. And yes, drama houses get lazy, and television heads get really lazy, and they say, oh, we'll wait for another NGO to come around and do another serial like this. Everybody wants good money to come in. So what they did next was they did several more serials all about child molestation. Suddenly, this was the new formula. And it didn't have any of the checks and balances that were there in Odari. So these serials would show, there was one in particular which I saw, in which this man basically is a child molester and molests children and all of these things. And finally, he's found out by his wife, and finally, he's found out by the larger community. And the whole last episode is focused on forgiving him. There's songs playing in the background where they're saying forgiveness is the best thing. Forgive this man. Forgive this man. He is at a shrine. He is in a bad state. The whole focus of the serial is not on this survivor. The focus is on this man who has committed this crime and is now should be forgiven, and how miserable he is and what a bad state he's in. So you had all the Odari spin-offs. You had 20 serials about child molestation, which were not needed, because then it becomes, something that you ogle at on television time and time and time again. It does not serve its purpose anymore. And they were sending out terrible messages. So I would say that if there is money to be had, even the child trafficking one was also funded by an NGO. Tomorrow there'll be more serials on child trafficking, which would be not be very good, and and they'll have the same number of problems. The question, yes, that the sort of question behind this, I think, is why aren't our drama heads doing this? Why aren't our channels doing this? Firstly, I think they're very lazy. You get a formula, you get a success, something works, and then they will latch onto it. And then they will repeat it again and again and again. They will search for the biggest stories that they can, the biggest headlines. Like, for example, recently, just a few months ago, this drama serial called Dunk has just come to an end, and there's been a lot of debate about it. Women organizations have talked about it. Women have talked about it, and it was about a girl who falsely accuses her her professor of sexual harassment. And in a day and age like this, after the Me Too movement, in a day and age like this, when we live in a society where messages are either black or white, this is one of the problems. Nuance doesn't get used, or does it not work? I don't know which it is. But what happens is that you see this girl, and in the beginning stages, you don't know. By the way, also I think the same director who did Chief, he just does thrillers very well. And in the beginning, you don't know who is, what's the real story and what isn't the story. But in this day and age, to come out with a female who falsely accuses a man, basically, that sort of the kind of conversation, I won't say the message, but the kind of conversation that will generate is, oh, so this is what women do. Women, it puts into doubt all women who accuse men, or anybody who accuses somebody of molestation. And so basically, what you're then trying to teach to your audience, whether consciously or not consciously, is that if some woman comes out and accuses a man in a position of authority, she's probably got an axe to grind. She's probably not telling the truth. How dangerous is that? How absolutely appalling in this kind of society where we don't have access to that much. Yes, we have people on Twitter. 9 million people in Pakistan, 10 million people in Pakistan are on Twitter. We have more on Instagram. We have millions of Pakistanis on TikTok, but that's not exactly talking about these issues either. I'd just like to remark about something Sharmeen said earlier. And you talked about how women help each other in the actual context that you've been seeing. These women, I mean, I've been reading the wonderful stories that you've written about. And one of the things that you see in Pakistani drama series constantly is there's no sisterhood. Is that women are constantly scheming against each other. The not only the sas, but also the sister-in-law feels that her brother will no longer love her. He will just want, he will just, so the bhabi becomes the bhabi nanand relationship is contentious. The mother-in-law, even to the extent the father and daughter relationship is such that the father just keeps saying, beti, what ab to ye tumhara ghar hai, yahan se tumhara janaza niklega. So she can't even talk to her father about her husband and how he's treating her. So everybody around you doesn't support you. Women especially are pitted against each other. If you have a sacrificing wife, and sacrifice, by the way, is the ultimate ideal that is portrayed on all these channels. Be self-sacrificing, be obstinate, but be self-sacrificing. Speak up occasionally, but be sullen and don't speak up openly. Go away from your husband for 30 years, don't see him, but don't tell him that your mother-in-law was being nasty to you. That's the kind of, that's the kind of drama twists and turns that our dramas have. The problem really is that when you don't show women supporting women, then women in the communities that Sharmeen is talking about are going to feel very reluctant to go to somebody. I'm not saying they will see that and they will never go to somebody. Obviously, they do go to people, but it's not fostering a climate whereby you trust other women. It's not fostering a climate where you say, listen to these women who are telling you that it's not okay that a man is hitting you. It's not okay that there's violence in the home. Um, and that's one of the most insidious, horrible ways to sort of inculcate this kind of this lack of confidence of going to somebody else, for getting help, for because what else are these women going to do? They're going to look first in their community to see who can help them. So this horrible formula that they've tacked on is that all women are against each other. And you would think that would not happen in every serial. It happens in every serial. Yeah.
I have to wrap up the conversation now. So I've been sort of, there's a question that came to my mind when I first began this conversation with Ms. Chinoy, and you mentioned it, again, this next phase. I mean, in your first answer, you spoke about the fact that you keep thinking how to sort of bring all these women together that are working in their communities, in different cities or villages. I suppose that's also what you meant, when you in your last answer, you spoke about the next phase. Do you have any ideas, Ms. Chinoy? How do we connect? How can you or anybody else connect all these women so that it's more than just one individual working in a community? It turns into a movement.
I'm waiting for a revolution led by women in this country, because I think it's about time that, and I think it needs to be literally someone like WAF coming together to say that we are going to now have a network, reach out to rural communities, get women involved, form some sort of a patchwork network so that we have conferences that are Punjab-centric and Sindh-centric and KP-centric, where women from all across can come. And then a national conference that brings hundreds of thousands of women together to talk about the issues that confront us. There's nothing more threatening to our state than to see women who are able to stand on their own two feet, who are articulate, who do not hesitate, who stare at men in the eyes and speak their mind. And I think that there are plenty of those women, and I think that we need to use our established networks that we already have and just sort of dig them down, give them new direction so that they spread, so that younger blood comes into it, so that we have this network that we need. I don't think that we can bring about change for women in this country until women themselves know that they can be agents of change. I think that there are a lot of brave women in this country. We need a singular brave woman to sort of bring them together. I always thought of Asma Jahangir as that, one woman who was always standing on the front lines. And with her gone, we have incredible women, Shahi Rahman being one of them, and so many others who I think together can be that front line that brings all these women together. And I do think a national conference is important. I think regional conferences are important. I mean, in 2021, the issues that confront women are myriad. We are left out of every conversation because we do not own property. We are not wealthy. We do not have access to money. We cannot mobilize. We're not on the front lines of every political party. We have a minority in parliament. Yes, it is a very vocal minority, but most of the women in parliament are there because of the quota system, not because they were elected. Same with the Senate. I mean, the thing that we need to start doing is we need to start thinking about why we're left out of conversations, and it is because we do not have power. And we need to get power. We really do need to get power. And how does power come? It comes in numbers. If we have the strength, we have the numbers, that power will come.
Thank you so much, both of you. That was a wonderful conversation. I really particularly enjoyed chatting with both of you. I hope everybody who's watching enjoys it and learns from it as much as I did. Thank you for sparing the time for this. And I hope to sort of talk to you two again. Thank you.
Thank you.